You ever notice how some people seem to draw you in only to pull away the moment you get close? They text you, flirt with you, maybe even make you feel like you're the one they've been waiting for, and then silence, distance, coldness. Suddenly, you're wondering what you did wrong. But let me tell you something powerful. It's not that you were too much. It's that you were seen too clearly by someone who wasn't ready for that level of truth. Avoidant personalities often crave connection just as much as anyone else. They just fear what real intimacy demands: vulnerability, accountability, and consistency. They want love, but on their terms, love without exposure. And that's where the super empath enters the story. A super empath is not just a kind person. They're not just someone who forgives easily or loves deeply. They are someone who can feel everything and yet they stay grounded. They sense manipulation, they notice patterns, and they have this rare ability to remain compassionate without losing themselves. Here's what makes them unstoppable. An avoidant can't control a super empath because the super empath has already mastered what the avoidant fears most: emotional awareness. The avoidant hides from their feelings. The super empath faces them head on. The avoidant builds walls. The super empath builds boundaries. The avoidant fears being seen. The super empath sees themselves clearly. You see, the moment the super empath stops trying to fix the avoidant, the entire dynamic collapses. Because the avoidant's control only works when you're chasing. The moment you stand in your peace, the game ends, and it's not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about evolution. The super empath doesn't hate the avoidant. They understand them. But they also understand that love without respect, consistency, and vulnerability isn't love. It's emotional starvation dressed up as passion. So if you've ever found yourself caught in that cycle, texting, hoping, analyzing every word, take a breath. Remember who you are. You don't need to chase clarity from someone who's hiding from their own reflection. The super empath learns to walk away not because they've stopped caring, but because they've started caring for themselves. That's your power, that's your freedom, and that's why an avoidant can't control you. Emotional awareness is not just about recognizing what you feel. It's about understanding why you feel it and what that feeling is trying to tell you. For the super empath, this awareness becomes their quiet armor. Where others get lost in emotional chaos, the super empath observes it. They can feel deeply without being drowned by it. They know when a wave of sadness comes that it's not a signal of weakness, but a message that something within them needs attention. They know when anger rises, it's not an invitation to attack, but a reminder that a boundary has been crossed. This level of emotional fluency is what sets them apart and what makes them impossible to manipulate. An avoidant often relies on emotional confusion to maintain control. They create uncertainty, withdraw affection, and keep their partner guessing. It's not always malicious. It's how they manage their own fear of intimacy. But emotional awareness dismantles that confusion. When a super empath feels that sudden withdrawal, they don't internalize it as rejection. They recognize it as avoidance behavior, and instead of reacting, they reflect. They can name what's happening. This isn't about me. This is about their fear. That recognition changes everything. It takes the sting out of emotional games and replaces it with understanding. This doesn't mean the super empath becomes detached or indifferent. Quite the opposite. They feel everything: the longing, the disappointment, the empathy for the avoidance struggle, but they don't let those feelings dictate their worth. Emotional awareness gives them the ability to pause between feeling and action. That pause is where strength lies. It's where they decide, I can love you and still not chase you. I can understand your pain without letting it define my peace. That level of control doesn't come from coldness. It comes from maturity. When someone who is emotionally aware enters a relationship, they bring clarity, they communicate their needs openly, they sense when something is off. And because they understand their own emotions so deeply, they can often sense the unspoken emotions of others. That's why the super empath often intimidates avoidants, not because they're confrontational, but because they see through the masks. They can recognize fear disguised as anger, detachment disguised as independence, and inconsistency disguised as confusion. This awareness also frees the super empath from emotional dependency. They no longer seek validation from someone who cannot give it. They understand that another person's inability to connect is not a reflection of their value. When they feel pain, they don't rush to escape it through overthinking or fixing someone else. They sit with it, learn from it, and grow through it. In doing so, they build emotional resilience, the kind that can't be shaken by silence, ghosting, or hot and cold affection. Emotional awareness becomes their power source. It allows them to love consciously, respond calmly, and protect their peace gracefully. They no longer need to prove their worth through someone else's acceptance. They simply know it, and when you know yourself at that level, no one, not even an avoidant, can control you. Boundaries are often misunderstood. People think they're walls meant to keep others out, but for the super empath, boundaries are actually bridges that define where self-respect begins and where emotional chaos ends. A wall says you can't come in. A boundary says you can come in, but only respectfully. This difference is everything. While avoidant personalities tend to create emotional distance to protect themselves, the super empath creates emotional structure to protect their peace. That structure doesn't come from fear. It comes from wisdom earned through experience. A super empath has likely known what it feels like to give too much, to overextend emotionally, and to end up drained. They've felt the sting of being someone's emotional caretaker while their own needs went unmet. But through that pain, they learned something invaluable: that love without limits becomes self-sacrifice, and connection without boundaries becomes control. So, when they finally discover the balance between compassion and self-protection, they no longer mistake overgiving for kindness. They understand that real love thrives in mutual respect, not dependency. Boundaries are how they ensure that empathy doesn't turn into exhaustion. When someone starts to test their limits by being inconsistent, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable, the super empath doesn't beg for attention or compromise their standards. They step back and observe. They may say, "I care about you, but I won't chase clarity that should be freely given." That quiet firmness is what makes them so powerful. They don't raise their voice, they raise their standards. And the moment they do that, they shift the energy in any relationship dynamic. Avoidant individuals often fear being controlled, but ironically, they tend to control through withdrawal. They pull back affection, delay responses, and create emotional tension to maintain distance. However, boundaries dismantle that power. The super empath's calm detachment communicates, "I respect your space, but I also respect my own time." Suddenly, the avoidance push-pull stops working. There's no panic, no chasing, no emotional reaction to feed off. The super empath's boundaries turn the emotional game into stillness, and stillness is where manipulation loses its grip. Boundaries also teach others how to treat you. When the super empath expresses their limits with kindness and consistency, they model emotional maturity. They show that empathy doesn't mean enduring disrespect, and patience doesn't mean tolerating neglect. Their presence becomes a mirror for others, a reflection of what healthy love looks like. And while some people may feel uncomfortable facing that reflection, those who are truly ready for growth will rise to meet it. What's beautiful about the super empath's boundaries is that they come from love, not fear. They don't need to cut people off to feel safe. They simply know when to stop giving what isn't being reciprocated. They can remain open-hearted and still protect their peace. They don't close their heart, they filter access to it. This balance allows them to experience deep connections without losing themselves in them. In the end, it's not that they've stopped caring, it's that they've learned to care intelligently. Detachment is often mistaken for indifference, but for the super empath, it is an act of emotional mastery. It doesn't mean they stop caring, it means they stop clinging. It means they can feel everything fully yet not allow those feelings to dictate their peace. Detachment is the quiet moment when they realize they don't need to control the outcome or convince anyone of their worth. When an avoidant tries to maintain control by creating distance or confusion, detachment becomes the super empath's greatest strength, because the moment the empath stops chasing, the avoidant's entire strategy loses power. The game of emotional push and pull no longer works when one person simply refuses to play. Avoidants thrive in dynamics where the other person is constantly seeking reassurance. They withhold affection or communication, knowing that the other will reach out to restore the connection. This pattern feeds their illusion of control. But when the super empath detaches, the avoidant is met with silence, not pursuit, calmness, not chaos. The empath no longer reacts emotionally to withdrawal or inconsistency. Instead, they observe it. They understand that someone pulling away is not a reflection of their inadequacy, but of the other person's fear of closeness. This shift in perception changes everything. What once felt like rejection now feels like revelation. Detachment allows the super empath to see the situation clearly without emotional fog. They begin to recognize patterns for what they are, coping mechanisms. They stop trying to fix or interpret mixed signals and start honoring their own emotional needs. Their focus shifts from why are they pulling away to why am I still waiting for someone who can't show up. That shift isn't cold, it's healing. It's the reclaiming of emotional energy that was once wasted on uncertainty. What makes this kind of detachment so powerful is that it's rooted in awareness, not avoidance. The super empath doesn't shut down or harden their heart. They still care deeply. They just refuse to lose themselves in someone else's emotional unavailability. They understand that love without reciprocity drains rather than nourishes. They know that holding space for someone's healing doesn't mean sacrificing their own. So, when they let go, it's not because they've stopped loving, it's because they've started respecting themselves. This detachment also restores balance. The avoidant can no longer manipulate through silence or distance because the super empath no longer responds with desperation. Their peace becomes untouchable. They've learned that the need to control comes from fear, while true connection flows from freedom. By letting go, they make room for authenticity, the kind of love that doesn't depend on games, tension, or emotional guessing. In the end, detachment isn't about walking away from people. It's about walking away from patterns that hurt. It's the quiet realization that love cannot be sustained by one person doing all the emotional work. When the super empath detaches, they don't abandon the other, they simply return home to themselves, and that is the moment the avoidant can no longer control them. Compassion with clarity is the rare balance that turns the super empath into a force of emotional strength. Most people either lean too far into compassion, where they tolerate too much, or too far into clarity, where they become guarded and cynical. But the super empath manages to blend both to love deeply while still seeing clearly. This combination is what makes them magnetic yet unshakable. They can look at someone's pain and say, "I understand why you are this way," while also saying, "But I will not let it harm me." That level of emotional maturity disarms manipulation because it removes both blind tolerance and blind judgment. For the super empath, compassion doesn't mean excusing behavior. It means understanding it. They recognize that an avoidance distance isn't cruelty, but fear, a fear of being seen, a fear of needing someone, a fear of losing control. But instead of taking that personally, they hold it with gentle awareness. They can empathize with the avoidant's pain while still maintaining self-respect. They no longer confuse someone's emotional wounds with permission to overextend themselves. Their empathy becomes informed, wise, and protective rather than self-sacrificing. Clarity, on the other hand, keeps their compassion grounded. It allows them to discern between effort and excuses, love and attachment, change and promises. Clarity is what helps them step back and say, I see your struggle, but I also see your choices. It's this truth, seeing ability, that prevents them from getting caught in endless cycles of waiting, fixing, or hoping. They don't romanticize potential anymore. They respond to reality. That clarity acts like emotional armor, invisible but impenetrable. It doesn't block love, it filters it, allowing in only what aligns with their peace. When an avoidant interacts with a super empath who possesses compassion with clarity, they quickly realize they can't manipulate guilt or sympathy. The super empath can comfort them, but will not enable them. They can forgive but won't forget patterns. They can listen but will not be silenced by confusion. This balanced energy is unsettling for avoidants who rely on emotional imbalance to maintain control. The super empath's calm presence exposes the truth that real connection requires vulnerability, not power. Compassion with clarity also allows the super empath to release resentment. They no longer carry the emotional burden of other people's choices. They understand that everyone is doing the best they can with the awareness they have, but they also know that awareness doesn't erase accountability. This understanding frees them from both bitterness and blame. They can let go with love, walk away with peace, and move forward without the heavy need to prove a point. This balanced compassion is not softness, it's strength disguised as grace. It's what keeps the super empath open, hearted in a world that often teaches people to shut down. They don't lose their empathy to protect themselves. They simply pair it with truth. They understand that love is not about saving someone from their shadows, it's about standing in your light and inviting them to rise if they choose to. And if they don't, the super empath still shines, unbroken and unbitter. Walking away is one of the hardest acts of strength a super empath can perform because their instinct is to heal, to understand, and to connect. But over time, they learn that staying in a relationship where love is one-sided or inconsistent is not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. For them, walking away is not about anger or rejection. It's about finally honoring their worth. It's about realizing that no amount of empathy can sustain a connection that lacks mutual effort. The super empath learns that self-respect is not negotiable, even for love. At first, the idea of leaving feels unnatural to them because they are wired to care deeply. They see potential in others, even when that potential isn't being fulfilled. They believe in the goodness beneath the avoidance fear, the tenderness hidden beneath emotional walls. But as they evolve, they start recognizing a crucial truth. Love cannot exist without presence. It cannot survive on promises and potential alone. They begin to understand that by staying in a dynamic that drains them, they are teaching the other person that inconsistency is acceptable, and that lesson goes against everything they stand for. When the super empath finally chooses to walk away, it's not an impulsive act. It's a calm decision that comes after deep reflection. They've cried, they've hoped, they've tried to make it work, but they've also listened to their intuition whispering, "You deserve more than almost." That quiet voice becomes their compass. The moment they act on it, they reclaim their power. They stop waiting for closure from the avoidant and give it to themselves. They stop hoping for emotional availability and instead create space for real intimacy to enter their life. The beauty of this choice lies in its grace. The super empath doesn't slam the door or seek revenge. They leave with peace because they understand that love mixed with pain is not meant to be endured forever. Their walking away is a statement of self-love, not bitterness. It says, "I still care for you, but I care for myself too." This kind of exit has a profound impact. It shakes the avoidant because they're used to being chased, not released. And when the empath's energy is no longer available, The avoidant is forced to face their own emptiness, the very thing they've been avoiding. For the super empath, walking away becomes an initiation into a new level of emotional freedom. They stop defining their worth through someone else's ability to love them. They begin to see that strength is not found in holding on, but in letting go with grace. Their peace no longer depends on whether someone chooses them, because they've already chosen themselves. They realize that self-respect is not the opposite of love, it's the foundation of it. In the end, walking away doesn't mean they've stopped loving, it means they've stopped settling. It's not a cold act, but a courageous one. It's the moment when the super empath says, I deserve a love that meets me where I am, not one that punishes me for feeling deeply. And when they take that step forward, they do so not in sadness, but in quiet triumph, finally free, finally whole. In the end, the journey of the super empath is not about winning or losing, it's about awakening. It's about realizing that love should expand you, not exhaust you, and that peace is found in authenticity, not control. The super empath learns to love with an open heart but a steady mind, to walk away without hatred, and to stay true to themselves even when others can't meet them there. Because when you choose self-respect over chaos, you don't lose love, you find it within yourself. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for choosing growth over fear. Your heart is your greatest strength. Protect it, honor it, and let it lead you to the peace you deserve.